Hey, welcome to Dan's Model Works. We are at the clutter zone, and yes, it is part 8. Yes, sports fans, 8 parts so far for our modern US wrecker. So this is definitely the longest project I've put on YouTube so far. Let's see where we are. Get rid of this thing. Oops. Alrighty. So this is our main focus right now, is getting the boom and everything done. And you might notice that I've got the main winch in place, and I didn't really deviate from the instructions there. I pretty much was happy with the way that was. And I'm going to be putting the smaller one up here. No problems there. And I have glued the boom onto the hinge part here. And makes things a little bit simpler than it was when I had the C-clamp on it. Now, as for our stinger, that's the part that flips up, and this is the part that telescopes. And as you can see, I've done a little bit of filling. I still have to sand the top of that. And basically, this goes in there. And on the real truck, it telescopes in and out. And when this is basically just glued in like that, it's about the length of the stinger that we saw on the Ross towing truck. So I don't think I'm going to do any modifications to it. Now, one thing I will have to do, because the kit doesn't really give you the spreader bar that goes underneath and that the forks fit into, they don't really give you that part. They give you some sort of a weird attachment to extend the reach of the boom. Basically, as Italeri gives you the wrecker equipment, it doesn't have an extension boom. And of course, we've modified ours here to one that would extend. So that's going to be our main bit of scratch building that we have to do right now, is to recreate that spreader bar that fits on the end of here. Here, you might say, is the beginning of the end, rather the end part of our tow truck. And it's the bar that the receivers for the various forks and attachments are going to go on. And it would pivot right here, side to side, basically to allow the tow truck to go around a corner and for the towing vehicle to follow it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look around for some round frivets, something or other that I can put there that'll represent the hinge. But you can see that we've basically got the beginning of our stinger built here. Forgive me if I don't know the official name for these parts, but these are the bits that can slide from side to side and then have a pin put in them to customize the actual location where the forks go in. So what I've done is I've got the top plates in place and the bottom plates, and then I'll be cutting pieces of styrene to basically box it around to make this into a sleeve that can go back and forth. And then we'll be attaching a cylinder to the back side of each one of those. Now, I have deliberately not made them symmetrical because I want it obvious that these things can slide. So this one is a little bit further in than this one. This one is almost right out at the edge. Now, these are little pieces of evergreen styrene tubing glued in place. Now, we're still not finished, because what I want to do is I want to fair these in using some Tamiya putty so that it looks like it's all cast in one piece. But those are really the business end of a wrecker truck, what it uses to pick up the axle of its of the truck that it's aiding. Is there's little forks that fit into these fittings, and they stick up, and then that way when this lifts up, it can actually grab onto the axle or part of the frame of the truck it's towing. It took a couple applications of putty, but you can see I've faired in these two pieces of styrene pipe. As I said before, I deliberately didn't put them exactly in the same setting because I want to represent the fact that they can slide back and forth. And on the real truck, these are basically cast steel, so they need to look like they're all solid. And we'll see how successfully I carried that off when we give it a coat of paint later on. Here we can see I've mounted both of the winches on the base of the boom, and I'm not really deviating from Italeri's instructions in this case, because really I figure this is where you'd want the winches to be, and what I'm doing at this end here really doesn't have any bearing on what's here. One thing our wrecker is sorely lacking right now is muscles, and I'm going to be installing a set of hydraulic cylinders between here and there. And you can see I've already started to build a little bit of a structure there. Now basically I'm going to have a rod going across with some braces, and that's what the hydraulics are going to be mounted on. And I've started building, if I can focus on it here, I've started building the actual hydraulic cylinders. And they're going to go right there, and one on the other side. And right now they're not cut to length yet. I've left them over long just so I have something to manipulate them with. And basically it's just evergreen tubing with another piece glued on to the bottom. That piece on the bottom will actually go on the rod down there. So there's our outer sleeves for our main hydraulics for the boom. And now they're on the table. In this view, you can see that I've installed the lower parts of the hydraulic cylinders, the outer sleeves, onto the axle that I put in earlier. So all that's in place. Now what I've got to do is fabricate the inner cylinders and get them mounted up here. Here are the upper portions of the hydraulic cylinders. And to make the parts that go onto the truck, all I did was just cut a segment of the tubing and I mounted it on at 90 degrees like that. And that seems to be about the right appearance. On the boom itself, you can see that I've glued 2 pegs on there. And that's what those upper mounts on the upper pieces of the hydraulic arms, that's what they'll mount onto. Now what you're looking at right here is I kept my upper cylinders, or my upper parts, way too long, knowing that I was going to be trimming them down. So I've just basically slid it into the lower piece. And what we're looking at here, that would actually be close to the full extension of this boom. But as you can see, if we extend this out, this would be a fairly high reach for a conventional wrecker truck, as opposed to a rotator, which is more of a heavy-duty crane. So I think this is, obviously I will have to cut this cylinder, the upper part, down quite a bit. The nice thing about doing it this way is I can trim a little bit off, I can put it in, see where it's going to sit, because I basically want, when it's in the rest position, to have it up just a little bit, just like these trucks usually are found. And then I'll leave the whole thing so that they can flex. I mean, obviously you wouldn't want it going this high up. And not only that, all of this has to be plausible as going into that cylinder. I've done a little bit of trimming on my upper cylinder there. And actually I should call it a piston, because this is the cylinder, that's the piston portion. At any rate, I've done some trimming on it. And I've got the lower part of the stinger in place. So this is raised up quite a bit. I believe this is probably the position that the boom would be in the stinger and everything like that, if it was actually towing a truck. I want to trim this down a little bit farther so that in the at-rest position, when this is up, so that's the way it's going to be displayed, it's going to be clear of the ground. And I'm pretty sure that in its lowest position, the stinger should be almost touching the ground, because obviously if you've got a damaged truck, you want to be able to slide this in almost hard onto the ground. Alright, I've cut both of the upper portions to the same length and mounted them. And as you can see, when this is in the down position, it could easily get underneath a truck. Now there should be a hydraulic arrangement in here, and I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to try to replicate that, because the geometry is looking a little dubious here. So I'm thinking I might just leave that to the imagination. But at any rate, if I put this to the full up position, which would probably be approximately there, let's move back out. You can see that when the boom is all the way out and elevated, it would probably be about that high, which is quite a reach. So I think we've got our hydraulics where we want them to be. And it's time to start finalizing a lot of the stuff on the boom, especially up here. There needs to be quite a bit of reinforcing on these joins, as we saw on the truck at Ross Towing. As well as that, we need to get the spades in place, a few more details on our stinger, and then this whole assembly will be ready for paint, and at the same time we can start getting ready to attach our bodywork around it. Now, because we know I'm a sad fellow with too much time on my hands, I've been looking at this mechanism here, which causes the stinger to go up into the vertical position. And of course, they give you nothing in the kit. And what there should be is some sort of a hydraulic in here. So what I'm doing is, you can see I've started to grind away a slot there. I'm going to keep on doing that until I've got enough clearance that I can put a hydraulic cylinder. Let's get back on camera here. I can put a hydraulic cylinder from here to there. So that way, when I have it in the up position, you're not just looking at this big open area. There's actually, a plausible mechanism inside there. Because we know I'm just a glutton for punishment. I'm sorry, but I did a lot of this fabrication off camera. I just kind of got enthusiastic. But you can see I've made kind of a miniature hydraulic cylinder here. And if we turn the angle here a bit, you can see that the stinger in its down position is basically held at an angle I want it to be by that hydraulic cylinder. If we flip it this way, you can see that there isn't a whole lot of movement with that cylinder, but it does telescope in and out. And now we have a plausible muscle for our stinger attachment. I've boxed over the axle where the upper hydraulic meets the arm, as you can see. Now I'm going to flash up a picture of the wrecker at Ross Towing here. And as you can see, it has substantial bracing coming down on either side of this. So I'm going to try to replicate that. And as you can see, here's our hydraulics in action. As per the photos of the truck we saw at Ross Towing, I've added some gusseting to the sides of the hydraulic mounts there, and I've also added a pin to represent where they would have to remove that for servicing the hydraulics. And I think I'm just about ready to take these parts over to the spray booth and get them painted green, because the actual business end of the tow truck is going to be green, along with the front fenders. And of course, the body work at the back is going to be orange. So that'll be done at a later date after I build it. The lighting isn't the best, but you can see that the front fenders have been painted to me a green X5. And I think that looks good, and it'll set off the headlights and the turn signals and things nicely. And here is the, ooh, check out that slow hydraulic action there. Wow, we couldn't have planned that. At any rate, here is the mechanism, the boom for our wrecker, back from the paint booth. Actually, not quite directly back from the paint booth. There was lots of areas that, even with airbrushing, were not 100% coverage, and I had to do a little bit of regular brush painting to touch those areas up. I will be painting the coils of wire kind of a greasy rust color and picking out some other details. The other major project that'll have to be done is I had to put some bare metal foil on our main hydraulic rams there. I may have to redo it at a future date, mainly because the bare metal foil I have is a little old and crotchety. But for now, I think we've achieved the look we were looking for. That is some polished steel hydraulic rams. And for the hydraulic under here, I didn't bare metal foil that. I just simply painted it chrome silver. Just because I figured you're very rarely going to see it. It looked like a high degree of frustration to put a piece of bare metal foil in there. So at any rate, this is most of our lift mechanism done. As promised, I put some dark iron there on the cables. One thing that's kind of weird is I think Italeri could have represented a little bit more cable on these drums than they did. Because that really looks like, I don't know, like the guy's basically got his entire spool of wire out. I've decided instead of completely scratch building a new body, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use existing parts as a start point for an enlarged body. And one of the first things I'm going to do is, as you see here, this is where there's basically two brackets that come off of the tow truck bed or the frame. One goes in there. This is a nice deep pocket. The other one, however, is very, very small. So what I'm doing is I'm adding this piece of channel right here. So that way I can put the body on and off as I work on it to test fit. And I know it'll tend to grip the frame nice and solidly. And in a second I'll show you what at least the inner framework of the bodywork, how that fits onto the wrecker. Here we can see the inner framework and the fenders of the kit mounted onto the business part here. And to be honest, I don't think I could scratch build anything that fits as well as this. So I'm going to be using this. And I'm going to use the most, I'd say like 99% of the existing sides that go on here. And then if we move up to the front, this is the area that's going to have to be scratch built. And the first thing I'm going to do is probably scratch build a U-shaped frame to connect these together. So that way it can just vertically slot onto the tow truck and be removed for fitting and things like that. There's the first of our expansion panels in place to stretch things out. Now the second upper piece has been clipped in place. Clothespins are going to hold it in place till hopefully the glue sets up. I'm not going to worry about putting a vertical member in here because once I glue the side extensions in place, they'll end up keeping this rigid. And really these are only here to keep the body in the right shape. They don't have to worry about this sort of motion here. So it's starting to get difficult to get the whole thing into one frame. And most of the fundamentals are there, mostly just building the rear bodywork and putting all the crusty details on. But we're finally getting there. The end is in sight. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep on modeling.